as you can hear, this clock is running, tick-tock, tick-tock. It's one of my earliest memories. It was in my grandmother's house. So I'm going to let it continue to run while we talk today about places that I've taught over the years. So if the ticking is annoying to you, it's a comfort to me, and I appreciate it myself. I was thinking of places that over the years I've taught, and I've taught at the university level since 1958 or 59, and I actually began teaching college students even when I was an undergraduate at the University of Kansas, and continued to do so when I was a graduate student at Indiana and Starker's assistant. And I taught string pedagogy, violin, viola, cello, and bass for 2 years at Indiana. After Indiana, I went to Inter-American University of Puerto Rico at the invitation of Roy Harris, a composer of the time, who wanted to start a school between the Americas, Inter-American University. And so he built a big recording studio and took a few of us to the school to start this new endeavor. It never really took off, it never really grew. I was there about 2 years. But it was really a very interesting experience, and interesting students, not much formal background as far as music is concerned, but often very talented. And so I taught music courses there, and I taught theory, and did quite a bit of performing. Roy Harris built a T-shaped recording studio so he could isolate sound. It was really rather large. And we did quite a bit of recording there. In addition to that, I was in a vocal group that toured the Caribbean, singing jazz and Puerto Rican and Spanish songs. And all in all, it was a very enriching experience, and my first experience working with people of this age with full responsibility. And I would say also that this university in San Germán, Puerto Rico, is a beautiful university, it's a beautiful town, and the people in Puerto Rico are so hospitable and really wonderful. At any rate, in my second year there, I got a letter from the head of the music department at Ohio Wesleyan University, asking if I might be interested in going there, and wanted to talk on the telephone about the possibility. It so happens that in San Germán, Puerto Rico, there were only about 5 phones, and one of them was at the phone center. So I went to the phone center and was able to talk to this dean at Ohio Wesleyan University. Long story short, I went there. And at Ohio Wesleyan in Delaware, Ohio, I had the usual responsibilities of a very young beginning assistant professor. This was 1961 that I went there. So I taught cello. I played in the resident piano trio, the Duval trio. I taught from the beginning to Beethoven. I taught symphonic literature. I taught music appreciation. I taught chamber music literature, and I conducted opera. And I started a Suzuki program. It was a very busy time, did a lot of performing, did a lot of teaching, had some actually good students, some of whom actually went to Eastman somewhat later. In any case, that was a real education for me because I had to do so much studying and so much organizing in order to teach the classes. I never imagined myself teaching classes, and it was a big adjustment, but I found that I enjoyed it, and I found that it gave me an incredible perspective on the sweep of music history. And I began to see why we study medieval and Renaissance music. There's a reason for that, Baroque music. So you really learn a lot. While at Ohio Wesleyan, I was contacted by the Rochester Philharmonic Orchestra, asked if I would be interested in auditioning for first desk position, and so I did. I came to Rochester and I played for the conductor and the principal cello and a committee, and got into the RPO, the Rochester Philharmonic Orchestra. So I had to think about whether or not this was reason enough to leave Ohio Wesleyan, which I felt was sort of a backwater school, which of course it wasn't. It's a very fine music department, and the quality of the teaching there is absolutely terrific. And then I received a phone call from Walter Handel, who said, "I hear you got into the Rochester Philharmonic. I'm going to be conducting the Pittsburgh Symphony in Delaware, Ohio, in a couple of weeks, and I want you to play for me, because I'm thinking that maybe we could hire you at the Eastman School." So he came, and I picked him up in Columbus, Ohio, and he came to my apartment, and he said, we talked a while, and he said, "Play this, play that, play the other." And I did, and he said, "I think I'm going to hire you." And so there I was. And I came to Eastman in the summer of 1965. Taught summer school, had about 12 or 14 students in summer school, for heaven's sake, and played in summer orchestra, Eastman Chamber Orchestra, and a jazz orchestra that was very, very big. I can't remember the name of the program, but it's terribly big. And that began my career teaching in Rochester. And part of that was teaching pre-college, teaching college, and this grew over the years. My dearest colleague was Ron Leonard. We shared first desk in the Rochester Philharmonic, and we taught together. We taught classes together. He was actually a wonderful mentor for me. He's several years older than I was, and such a marvelous cellist and so well grounded, with a background in Curtis and Juilliard and so forth. In any case, Ron left. I took over his position in the Eastman Piano Quartet, did quite a bit of touring, an awful lot of teaching, and in 1976 received an offer from the Cleveland Institute of Music, of all places. And I didn't know much about the Cleveland Institute of Music at that time. Grant Johannesson, a marvelous pianist, was head of the institution. And in any case, I thought, well, I guess I'll try that. And I went to Cleveland, and my audition was to play the Archduke Trio with Grant and David Cerrone, who was the primary violin teacher there, he and his wife, Linda. And David is a fantastic teacher, extremely successful. Grant Johannesson had a wonderful career as a solo pianist. And it was quite an experience to play this magnificent piece with them. And I also played the F major Brahms, had long interviews. And it was There, I taught so much cello, did the Cleveland Chamber Music Seminar, which was an outstanding seminar, and had an absolutely wonderful time. In 1983, I got an offer from Northwestern University to move to Chicago, which I did. And Northwestern University is a magnificent school. It really is. But I was never quite at home there because it's on the quarter system, and that's not good for undergraduate string players. It just is really very difficult. But I taught. I think I had a full load, 16 students, and I was commuting back to Cleveland to teach the rest of my students. And then I got a phone call from Bob Freeman at Eastman. Could I come and teach 9 or 10 students at Eastman? And so I did. So I was commuting between Cleveland and Chicago and Rochester. And I also did a bit at Northern Illinois University, which is just a few miles away from Northwestern. I grew unhappy at Northwestern and was offered a job to come back to Cleveland Institute of Music, where David Cerrone had become the president. And so I went back, and he was basically building a rebirth of the school around Don Erb, a wonderful composer, Don Weilerstein of the Cleveland Quartet, and me. And the idea was to sort of have a fundament to grow string players from. And I taught there until 1999. Prior to 1999, I was asked again to start commuting to Eastman, which I did for a number of years between Eastman and Cleveland. And I had wonderful colleagues in Cleveland, did an awful lot of performing, and it was an absolutely great experience. In 1999, I was asked to come back to Eastman, which I did, and have been teaching there ever since. Was a number of years the chairman of the string, harp, and guitar program, and retired about 2 years ago. Along with this, I taught for 39 years at the Aspen Music Festival, which is almost a story in and of itself, which I'll leave to a later discussion.